our planet Earth, sometimes blue, sometimes green, but there were periods in history when this entire world had turned into a frozen desert. 5 times yes, exactly 5 times yes, exactly 5 times yes, when every direction was covered only with ice. These were the great ice ages, lasting not hundreds, but thousands of years. Among these ice ages was the last one, the time when humans lived in caves, hunted in small groups, and fought for survival. During this last ice age, around 20 to 25,000 years ago, a group of hunters set out from the frozen plains of Siberia, winds blowing clouds of snow, broken cliffs, shrubs buried under ice. And somewhere along these paths, these people lost their way. They had no idea that the route they were stumbling across was actually a hidden bridge between 2 continents. This path existed only because of the Ice Age. Seas had frozen, water levels had fallen, and land buried beneath the oceans suddenly emerged. This hunter tribe, carrying the same genes as humans from thousands of years earlier, crossed this dry, narrow land and stepped into a place we now call the New World America. They didn't even know they were about to change the course of history. Time passed. 11,000 years later, the Ice Age ended, the seas rose again, and that land bridge disappeared forever beneath the water. Today we call it the Bering Strait, the place where the distance between the old and new world narrows to just 85 kilometers. But the interesting thing is, humanity took 10,500 years to cross those same 85 kilometers again. So what did those people do in the new world? How did they survive? Who first discovered this land? And how did a nation there eventually become a global superpower? This is the mystery we are unlocking today in Unlocked History Hub. The hunter group that entered the New World slowly spread across the entire vast continent. Over centuries, they didn't just build settlements, they created great civilizations. Look at this ancient map. This is the earliest face of the New World. The region we now call Mexico was once home to a mighty empire. The Aztec Empire spread over 200,000 square kilometers, made up of 500 states, with a population of 6 million. It excelled in art, warfare, architecture, and religion. Below the Aztecs was the Maya civilization, around 4,000 years old, masters of knowledge, architecture, calendars, art, and culture. Their giant pyramids still stand as proof of human brilliance. And further south, another great realm, the Inca Empire, stretching from Ecuador to Chile and Argentina. Nearly 12 million people, and remarkable city planning across mountains, forests, and valleys. Besides these 3 great civilizations, the entire continent was filled with countless settlements, small villages, local tribes, different languages, and diverse cultures. In the West Indies lived the Arawak people, and from Canada to Brazil, from Argentina to Alaska, Native American tribes thrived, with maize as their most important crop food, strength, and culture. During this time, millions also lived in the Old World, but incredibly, both worlds were completely unaware of each other's existence. For them, the New World was only a myth, never a reality, and so, 2 worlds, to humanity, remained apart for thousands of years. This is the story of that forgotten land. This is the real history of America.
1700 years ago, ancient Chinese poets mentioned a land they imagined to be beyond this world, a region they called Fusang, a name meaning beyond 10 worlds, a place that seemed outside the boundaries of our earth. The poets wrote that east of the Eastern Sea there is a shore, the shore of Fusang, and if someone were to travel another 5,000 kilometers further east from there, they would reach a sea that is blue, vast, and stretches beyond the horizon. Was this mere poetry? Or was Fusang really the place we today call America? Because directly east of China lies America, and beyond it indeed stretches the Atlantic Ocean. In the year 458 CE, a Buddhist monk from Afghanistan named Hui Shen also undertook a long journey eastward. He set out with 4 companions, spent 40 years in an unknown land, and when he returned, he named the place Fusang. He wrote a travelogue describing the customs and landscapes of this new world. 500 years after Hui Shen, the seafaring peoples of northern Europe, the Vikings reached the coasts of America. They settled in Newfoundland, the same region that is now part of Canada. The layout of their settlements still exists today. This world was not seen only by poets or monks, but also by brave sailors who set foot there. Similarly, some Muslims claim that during the rule of the Umayyad Caliph, Abd al-Rahman III, their sailors reached America. They say they established settlements, built mosques, and spread Islam. On the other hand, some Hindus claim that their deities were part of the religious concepts of ancient American tribes as if some Hindu traveler reached America and left their influence behind, countless such claims are scattered throughout history. Whether they are true or false may not matter. The real question is, who really discovered this land? Who first understood that it was a new world? And who connected it to the old world? Neither the Chinese, nor the Afghan Buddhist travelers, nor the Muslim sailors, nor the Hindu visitors. Anyone understood that two separate worlds existed. No one realized that an entire continent was completely separate from Europe, Asia, and Africa. Thus, the two worlds, America and the Old World, remained entirely isolated from each other for thousands of years. People in the Old World believed the world ended with Europe and Africa, and that beyond it lay only the sea. And the Native American tribes thought the same, that beyond their coasts lay only water, and nothing else. What is out of sight becomes out of mind as well. This separation might have continued for thousands more years. But then the 15th century arrived, a century that changed the entire map of global power. Europe, which had been a major power until then, now stood at a crossroads where it was forced to seek new lands, new routes, new directions, new hopes. And the greatest reason behind this shift was the Muslim conquests. It was these conquests that altered the trade routes of the world, limited Europe, and compelled it to venture into the oceans. And in this quest, Europe reached a land that the Native Americans had left thousands of years earlier. This is the real story of discovery, a journey from one world to another that forever changed the course of history. Europe's wobbling empire, and the defeat that changed the world gradually. The Roman Empire weakened. The great power that once ruled 3 continents had now shrunk to just one city, the Byzantine Empire, not a full empire anymore, but a monument of the past, a final fortress standing on old walls. Then came 1453, the year that closed a chapter of Roman history that had spanned centuries forever. The armies of Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror broke through the gates of Constantinople, not in a single moment, but amid blood, cannons, and the deafening roar of steel. When the smoke cleared, the last breaths of the Roman Empire had vanished. The city's name was changed to Istanbul, and a heavy veil of grief settled over Europe. Why? Because Constantinople was not just a city, it was Europe's military stronghold, the heart of Orthodox Christianity, and the home of the grand church built by Constantine Hagia Sophia. Europeans considered it sacred, a dream, a faith, but along with faith, another lifeline was tied to this city, the artery of trade. This was the gateway through which all goods from China and Central Asia entered Europe. Silk, spices, precious stones, gold, silver, everything from daily necessities to luxuries passed through this route. After the Ottoman conquest, this route was cut off. This was the moment when the foundations of Europe shook. Europe's economic death, hunger, crime, and the night of despair. The closure of trade routes meant markets empty, workshops closed, stomachs empty. Hunger spread across European cities. People had nothing to eat. Mothers even left their children on heaps of garbage. Peasants were crushed under debt. Some committed suicide, and others were forced to live lives akin to slavery. When hunger twisted people's hands, they turned to looting. Streets, once full of life, became webs of death. Passersby feared not the steps on the ground, but stones hanging from the sky. Criminals dropped rocks from windows onto people passing below, crushed heads, and then fled with whatever they could grab from the bodies. The wealthy had guards. The common people had only prayers. This was Europe's economic grave, opened wide after the fall of Constantinople. Spiritual shock. The Christian world collapsing, but Europe feared more than hunger. It feared the trembling of its soul. The brave Crusader era had passed. Now, every day, a new territory was falling under Muslim control. Followers of Christianity feared that perhaps their religious power would vanish. A fear, a helplessness, and a question. What next? And it was this fear that forced Europe to make a decision. Search for a new world, find new routes, or perish. But Europe had no idea that just a few thousand kilometers to the west, a world existed so vast that it was almost equal to the known world. A world full of gold, silver, forests, food, and countless resources. They were unaware of this world. Their eyes were fixed only eastward, toward China and Japan. Marco Polo, the book that drove Europe crazy. In Europe's homes, coffeehouses, and royal courts, everywhere, stories of one book were circulating. The Travels of Marco Polo. He wrote Cathay for China, and Cipango for Japan. And about Japan, his words spun the minds of all Europe. The palace roofs there are made of gold, the windows and doors are gold, and even the floors are often decorated with gold. Europe's hungry, tired, and desperate people read this and clung to one hope. If we can reach China and Japan, perhaps our fortune will change. They did not know that the route to fortune was not east, but hidden to the west. Thus, in the pages of history, there came a moment when an Italian merchant, Marco Polo, ignited the sleeping hopes of Europe through his writings. Tales of China, its treasures, and the immense wealth of the Mongol ruler Kublai Khan. Marco Polo described it as if it were a paradise on earth. Whatever the truth might have been, one thing was certain. For Europe, drowning in the darkness of poverty and despair, these stories were the only glimmer of light, showing dreams grand, unbelievable dreams. It was these golden accounts of Marco Polo that stirred restlessness in the hearts of Europe's youth. A restless desire awakened to somehow reach China, Japan, and Cipango, to the lands where the rivers of wealth flowed, as Polo had exaggeratedly described. But there was one problem: the route. The overland paths had been blocked by the Turks. Other routes, through the Mediterranean and Egypt, were under the control of powerful Muslim empires, where attacks on European ships were commonplace. Thus, all of Europe found itself trapped, with reaching Asia seeming nearly impossible. Although brave explorers like Bartholomew Dias succeeded in navigating around Africa, the journey was so long that even a one-way trip took months. Europe's growing problems boiled down to a single question: which route was both short, safe, and a direct path to the doorstep of Asia? In this era of helplessness, a figure emerged to change the course of history: a relatively unknown Italian navigator, a man who claimed not only to know a direct route to Asia, but one in which enemy empires would not obstruct him. This route lay across the Atlantic Ocean. This claim came from a young man named Christopher Columbus. The Genoese navigator had spent most of his life at sea. Marco Polo's writings had inspired dreams in him as well. His skill in navigating by stars, sun, and moon gave him confidence. Like other educated men of his time, he also knew that the earth was round. On this belief, he asserted that if Europe sailed westward, Japan Cipango could be reached in just 4,500 kilometers. Reaching Japan meant opening the doors to China, and thereby gaining access to all the gold mines of Asia. But Columbus's dreams were not limited to gold, spices, and wealth. A religious zeal also grew within him. He called himself a Christ's bearer, one who carries Christ's burden. According to Christian tradition, a man named Christopher had once carried Jesus across a river on his back, and thus came to be known as a Christ-bearer. Columbus adopted this role for himself. In his mind, there was a vision: a new world where he could plant the flag of Christianity, a desire to establish a great Christian empire, even greater than the Roman Empire, one whose foundation he himself would lay. He believed that finding this new route would not only end Europe's poverty, but also restore Christianity to power. This was the passion that carried him from court to court, from Italy to Portugal, and then to England. Columbus's journey was not simple. At every court, walls of rejection rose before him. No one believed him, yet he did not relent. In his eyes burned the same spark that Marco Polo's pages had ignited. The dreams that had inspired Europe's poor generations centuries earlier now shimmered in Columbus's eyes as a new world across the ocean. In every European court, Columbus continued to present his plan for a westward voyage, always accompanied by dreams of wealth and riches. He knew how dire Europe's condition was. Poverty had already broken people's backs. The social system was weak, and waves of despair swept across the land. Yet the reality was that no king or queen was willing to support him. Still, Columbus remained steadfast, never lost courage, and kept trying persistently. Finally, in 1485, he arrived in Spain. At that time, Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella sat on the throne, fully engaged in their campaign to expel the Muslims from the country. Columbus spent 7 years in Spain, visiting various courts to present his proposal. But the Queen had no time. She was focused on her major plans. In 1491, when Granada, the last stronghold of the Muslims, was close to its final defeat, the Queen summoned Columbus to her court. Columbus confidently presented his plan. He claimed that his proposal was the best and that it would surely succeed. He said he would reach the resources of this world via the routes to China and Japan, bringing back so much gold and wealth that Spain would become the richest country in the world. At the same time, the new lands he would reach would make it easier to spread Christianity and extend the influence of the Spanish crown. Queen Isabella, seeing the ambition of Columbus's plan, his skill, and his religious zeal, granted him permission and declared financial support. Thus, Columbus achieved his first success in the Spanish court. However, Queen Isabella did not know that the man she was trusting was hiding a secret. Columbus kept even his sailors and crew completely in the dark. This deception was so deep and dangerous that it put everyone's lives at risk. Why did Columbus's companions begin to plot against him? Under what obsession was he making promises that could not be fulfilled? And what was the secret that opened the doors of danger for his crew? All these mysteries and the story of Columbus's dangerous plan will be revealed in the next episode, the second episode of History of America.